Jeff, I would really encourage you, if you're going to respond to this in a way that actually engages the argument and answers the question that I'm going to ask.
Oh, okay. So Jeff is a atheist creator on TikTok, and he's notoriously banned by TikTok multiple times. That's why his name on TikTok right now is TikTok Please Don't Ban Me. Jeff is a pretty good friend, so I'm sure that he responded appropriately to this guy. But let's actually address the problem or the question that he's going to be presenting here. I'm sure that he's in no way going to misrepresent what's in the Bible or biblical slavery or any of that kind of shit. He's going to be totally straight and honest with us, right?
So your entire argument starts off with this presupposition, but the problem is it's a very bad presupposition because it doesn't really work 100% of the time. The presupposition is that because something is in God's law, he must be in support of it. You say this about slavery, and this is why you claim that the God of the Bible supports slavery.
Well, so it's not a presupposition. I mean, that's just how shit works. While on a human level, us making up laws to control certain things in societies, and maybe those laws don't really reflect what we want, I feel like that's a very human level thing. But what we're talking about is God and God's law. And you really don't have a good argument here if this is the route that you're going to go with, because God painstakingly tells the Israelite people exactly how he wants shit. He tells the Israelite people exactly how encrusted to make the Ark of the Covenant. He lays out very specific building plans for the temples, like both of them that he has them built. When God told Moses to build the Ark, he gave very specific plans. So specific, at least, that, we could conceivably build the Ark today, which is something that Ken Ham over at the Ark Encounter museum attraction. I don't know what to fucking call it, but it's a boat that don't float. Anyways, he supposedly reconstructed the Ark out of what's in the Bible. So don't tell me that God can't just sit down and say, hey, don't own people, or, just put in some very basic fucking things. By God allowing something to happen, he essentially condones it. But he does more than condone it. He actually commands the taking of sexual slaves, like in Numbers 31, where he has the Israelite people attack the Midianite people and destroy them. Oh, with the exception of all the little prepubescent girls that have not known the touch of a man. Have you allowed all the women to live? He asks them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. Numbers 31:15-18. Now, a lot of apologists like to suggest that the Midianites were just asking for it. This was a wartime effort. Like, they were seeking vengeance because of something the Midianites did to the Israelites. Number one, that doesn't excuse them stealing all the prepubescent girls so that they could take them as sexual slaves. And I get it, you don't like thinking about it like that, but that's essentially what this is. Destroying an entire city and taking little girls as sexual plunder. Two, you really can't argue that the Midianites were asking for it, because the only thing that the Midianites did were mingle with the Israelites. This entire thing is about mixing the races. 1950 segregation shit. God doesn't like that, and so he had the Israelites go and destroy this entire race of people, with the exception, of course, for the little girls. This is a clear-cut example of sexual slavery and God directly commanding the Israelites to come in and take sexual slaves. Put this into the context of whatever in the fuck this guy's trying to tell us. Whatever he's trying to spin our direction. He's trying to suggest that just because God has certain laws and things in his Bible. That doesn't mean that he condones this behavior. Well, my question is, and maybe you can honestly interact with this there, dipshit. Do you really think that if God didn't condone taking of slaves or capturing little girls as sexual slaves, do you really think that if he didn't condone that, he would command it? Forget about the laws that definitely prove that God condones the taking of slaves and the purchasing of slaves. But this part right here, where you simply cannot separate the fact that God commands the taking of slaves with him condoning slavery. You can't divorce the two ideas.
And even why the Bible itself tells us slavery is okay. The problem with this is, one, you can't demonstrate that this is God's ideal moral law of the land, and every piece of evidence that the Bible gives us about the law indicates that it's not.
Oh, where exactly? I would really love a fucking citation for this, like how we know that this isn't his ideal situation. Well, let me ask this. If God can ideally dictate to his prophets and whoever else exactly what kind of fire to use to light incense, how encrusted the little dildos on his ark are, and exactly how golden his throne room should be in the temple, then why can't his ideal moral law just exclude slavery? I'm not trying to suggest that I know God's mind or know what God's ideal set of morality is. But considering all of the little nitpicky things that God lays out for the Israelites, along with the fact that he's supposed to be the standard for everything, like he's all powerful, he's all knowing. These people are supposed to follow whatever he says, no matter what. And the consequences are dire. Like I mentioned before with the whole fire being used to light the incense. Well, two priests early on, I do believe it was Moses' brothers, sons, two of them used the wrong kind of fire to light the incense. That's it. You know what God did? He Hadoukened two fireballs right up their ass and caused them to explode spontaneously. You're trying to tell me that God, in his moral foundation that he lays out in his covenant with the Israelites, he couldn't just say, hey, don't own other people. That's really shitty. Why would God lay down any kind of law that wasn't his ideal kind of law? Also, another good question is, why is it that God has to work around whatever the Israelites would accept? This seems to be kind of like circular, because it's like the Israelites must listen and do whatever God says, but God also has to craft laws that will make it easy for the Israelites to follow. Like, I don't know. This just seems to be like a dog chasing his tail here.
So my question to you, Jeff, is how do you conclude that the reason God allowed slavery is because he was okay with slavery?
Well, probably because he directly commands the Israelites to take slaves, and he also sets up the foundation for the Israelites to properly purchase slaves from the nations around them. Like here in Leviticus 25:44-46. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. So here's my question. Again, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but the question must be asked. If God could sit there in the same breath and say, hey, don't take your Israelites as chattel slaves, then he could also say, hey, don't take anybody as chattel slaves. I don't see why it's so difficult for him to do that if he doesn't approve of it. It's obvious that God doesn't condone the taking of Israelite slaves, or, well, specifically the Israelites taking their fellow countrymen as slaves. So why is it different for the foreigners? Why is it different? Now, coming from a secular perspective on this, it makes a lot of sense because this matches with the other laws in the Near East at that time. In that area, these laws were pretty much a standard thing. Don't take your countrymen as a slave, but you can purchase slaves from the countries around you. Like, those were the laws that were pretty much standard throughout the Near Eastern cultures at that time. So from a secular perspective, it makes total sense. Where it does not make sense and is actually contradictory with reality and internally contradictory to your own theology is when you try to convince somebody or you try to make the argument that God doesn't condone slavery, but allows it for whatever kind of fucking reason. God is the one setting the rules here. God is in the power position. If he doesn't want people to take slaves, he can very obviously tell them, hey, don't take these people as slaves. But God distinctly chose to say, hey, take those people as slaves, but don't take these people as slaves. You really have no argument there to say, oh, God doesn't condone slavery when God specifically condones it.
Now, if you were an intellectually honest person, your argument wouldn't be so stretched out. You wouldn't stop at God is pro-slave. You would stop at God allowed slavery, and we really don't know why.
Let's see. Do we not know why? My guess is, and I'm just spitballing here, is that these laws that we're talking about here are representative of the laws that were commonly found throughout cultures in the Near East at the time. So, considering that they are pretty much the standard, it makes a lot of sense that they would have their God instruct them to keep with the standard that had already been laid out. It's not about like knowing God's mind or knowing what God's ideal moral law is. If God is in the power position, he can set the rules, and he does set the rules in the Bible. So why doesn't he set the rule that you just can't own another person? I feel like that's a legitimate question that needs to be answered by apologists, and you really don't have a good answer for it because you would have to lie about what's directly in the text in order to argue against it. And it amazes me at how quick apologists are at lying about these things.